Biography. Edgar Allan Poe lost his parents, traveling stage actors. When he was only 2 years old, little Edward was raised by John Allan, a village Richmond businessman. Poe's relationship with his adoptive father was traumatic. His mother's early death will also become one of his recurring obsessions. From 1815 to 1820, he lived with John Allan and his wife in the United Kingdom, where he began his education. After returning to the United States, Edgar Allan Poe continued to study in private schools and attend the University of Virginia, but in 1827, his fondness for gambling and drinking led to his expulsion. He left the girlship assigned to him by his adoptive father shortly thereafter and traveled to Boston, where he anonymously published his first book, Tremblade and Other Poems. He then enlisted in the army, where he remained for 2 years. In 1829, his second book of poems, All Fear, appeared and he obtained, through the influence of his adoptive father, a position at the West Point Military Academy, from which he was expelled a few months later for neglect of duty. In 1832, and after the publication of his third book, Poems by Edgar Allan Poe, he moved to Baltimore, where he married his very young cousin Virginia Clemm, who was then 14 years old. Around this time, he became editor of the Southern Baltimore Messenger newspaper, in which he wrote several of his stories and poems, and which under his direction would become the most important newspaper in the southern part of the country. Later, he contributed to several magazines in Philadelphia and New York, the city where he had settled with his wife in 1837. His work in insight and often scandalous literary critic earned him a certain notoriety, and his original appraisals of the short story and nature of poetry will not fail to gain influence over time. In 1840, he published in Philadelphia Salty of the Gore-Tex and the Arabesque. Then he obtained an extraordinary success with the Golden Beetle. 1843, a story about the fabulous buried treasure as emblematic of his writing as the collection of poems. The Raven and Other Poems, 1845, which brought his literary reputation to the top. 1849, found unconscious on a Baltimore street and taken to a hospital, where he died a few days later, apparently of a stroke, due to alcoholic and drug abuse. The Premature Burial, Edgar Allan Poe. The author is his introduction to the stories, begins with a description of a series of tragic events, which cause the death of people throughout the stories. Emphasis natural disasters, diseases, plagues, the climate, the lives of millions of people, as well as social phenomena that culminated in the slaughter in different places and death impressions. For the author, these events are the calamities of life that happened to many individuals and not immense. From this perspective, the author focused his narrative on impress on unusual events that have happened throughout history of people buried alive who have fallen into the bed of death as a result of disease or accidents and that taught investigation and medical diagnosis. In some cases, due to lack of vital signs and lividity of the body, and in others with an apparent state of putrefaction, were considered dead and later buried alive, and then these people were restored and regained life, in some cases with a fatal outcome, and in others incorporated into the show's social and family life. Among the stories narrated by the author There is what happened in Baltimore, where the wife of a prominent lawyer and member of Congress is victim of an illness that culminates with the apparent death of this person. The lady was deposited in the family vault, which remained closed for the following 3 years. At the expiration of this term, it was opened for the reception of a sarcophagus, but what a frightful show awaited the husband when he opened the door in person. As he pushed open the hinges, an object dressed in white fell creaking into his arms. It was the skeleton of his wife with the shirt still on. Careful investigation revealed evidence that she had revived 2 days after her burial, that her struggle inside the coffin had caused it to fall from a niche or shelf to the ground, and that by breaking the coffin she was able to climb out of it. A lamp which had been accidentally left full of oil inside a tomb appeared empty. Perhaps it had been exhausted, however, but by evaporation. On the top step of the stairway leading down into the gaslight chamber was a large fragment of the coffin, with which, to all appearances, the woman had tried to attract attention by banging on the iron door. As she did so, she probably fainted or perhaps died of sheer terror, and, and as she fell, the sword became strangled in some piece of iron projecting inward. There it remained and thus rotted erect. Another story happened in France in the year 1810, when the premature burial of Victoria Ladford case took place. This prominent young woman from a good family rejected the love of her life, a young literary man and journalist, and married a rich man and diplomat, who was presumed to have been violent towards his spouse. The love of her life, upon learning of the death, decides to dig up the body to obtain as a souvenir the hair of his beloved, and at the moment of the exhumation, he realized that she recovers her life. She recovers, and later they decide to travel to America, and after many years they return to France. Similar cases were collected by the Leipzig Surgical Journal. Another story told by the author is that of an artillery officer who falls from his horse, receiving a strong contusion in the head. He is after a process of medical recovery, reflects, and is considered that the treating doctors, when observing the initial medical picture, want to perform the autopsy to the body of the soldier, which was not allowed by the relatives. However, the doctors made an agreement with the body traffickers, who dug, who dug up the body and delivered it into a clinic. The supposed deceased was subject to a series of studies and the application of the so-called galvanic battery in his pectoral muscle, a procedure which brought the patient back to life. The most unusual part of this history is that the patient reports that at all times he was aware of his condition, and that something did not allow him to wake until he was intervened with the galvanic battery. A case of similar characters was that of a person who was diagnosed with foot and mouth disease, was declared dead, and later recovered his life with its galvanic battery produced and was reintegrated into society. These extraordinary stories were part of the story of making that give us an account of one or more cases of the so-called premature burial.